What's up, data transformers? This is Bolaji, and welcome to Data Career Transformations, the show where we watch analytics engineers, data analysts, and data scientists transform their careers. Today, we're talking to an ops and data nerd who's a co-founder of DataDuel.co. It's a data analytics debate blog that is very well written. He builds solutions that make data easy and easy to find, easy to digest. But this is what's not easy about this man. He actually discovered a love for languages on a trip to Spain. And so what do when you discover a love for languages? You travel abroad. He studies abroad in Spain, in Argentina. While in Spain, talk about bucket list. He went to the Tomatina. This is a humongous tomato fight industry. This is stuff of legends. I gotta learn more about this. While he's not off on these international adventures, he's actually practicing, or he used to practice economic development, studied this, was about to be posted to Bolivia before things fell through. And so what do you do when your economic development job falls through? You fall back on data analytics. Please help me welcome international man of mystery, from customer support rep to newly minted manager of Rev Ops and Analytics at 1Password, Nate Sooter. What's up, Nate?
Hey, thanks. I'm really honored to be here. I'm really excited to chat, about analytics and the messy journey it is to get to a spot. I think it's a story you'll hear pretty often.
I don't know, Nate, if anyone's journey is necessarily as messy as yours. No disrespect. This is meandering. Like, oh my goodness. So you've made the argument, Nate, that there's no single path into an analytics career. Why have you come to this conclusion?
In short, it's from watching others who end up with me, who work alongside me, and they all come from an incredible diverse set of backgrounds and experiences and careers. So that's largely drawn from meeting folks who showed up as from teachers, from doing stuff in engineering of some kind, from doing stuff in entertainment. Like the folks come from all over the place. So yeah, it's an observation more than anything else. Yeah.
That's crazy. I love a quote that you shared, Nate, on your blog. You said, if we treated careers more like dating, nobody would settle down so quickly. Are you saying we should swipe left a little bit more often than maybe settling for where we are in our career trajectory?
I think that's how it is for myself. Certainly that's ring true. I think other folks have more settled careers and that works really well for them. So I think in the data world, as you're getting settled into it, though, I think getting some good diverse experiences is helpful. I found that. So that's an anecdote that has ring true for myself. And I think it might ring true for some other folks.
I actually value quite a bit, Nate, how you're distinguishing between anecdotal information, qualitative information, which is maybe not necessarily statistically relevant, but I think very relevant for forming educated hypotheses. I wonder if you could maybe unpack this concept of like the wandering path that people might find themselves on in trying to get to, goodness, a title like Rev Ops Analytics at 1Password. Oh my gosh. Like, how did you get there? Surely you went to school for analytics and the like.
I wish it was that simple. That's not the journey I was able to take. It's funny, when I went to University of Washington. It's just out of frame. I have a husky flag hanging back here, but there was no classes when I was going there for data analytics, data science. This is, I graduated in 2010. So that path wasn't there. There was nothing to study. I studied economics, which had some forbearing in that, right? There were some classes on it, but in short, analytics wasn't a career that anyone considered. When I joined the workforce after I wasn't able to go and live in Latin America, I was working as a customer success rep at a tech company. And I was doing data, and I realized, wait a minute, like someone had to pull me aside and said, like this data thing you're doing naturally, that's actually, you can do that as a job. You should think about it. So someone pulled me aside and mentioned that. So as much as I wish it was kind of a clean path, this is one where most folks, I think, critically get some kind of experience or domain knowledge of some part of the business. It's marketing. In my case, it was the sales side, customer success, whether it's operations in a warehouse. It could be any number of spots to get expertise. And at that point, you use data as a superpower, frankly, and you're able to actually know how to leverage that data to make a difference. You have to have some knowledge of the business. That's why I'm pretty convinced it's meandering. You start somewhere and you realize you're pretty good at this data thing, and that superpowers you into kind of a spot in analytics.
That's actually really intriguing. There have been a number of folks who've talked about the importance of having domain knowledge and that being a differentiator. And I hadn't necessarily connected that point until you phrased it the way that you did, Nate, to your description of the wandering path. And so you've categorized this wandering path almost as getting a college degree or some other formal training, then working in some job that's non-analytics related, and then getting that spark, recognizing that interest in analytics. Like, this stuff is kind of fun, but then now intentionally doing more analytics work. Did that happen accidentally for you? I know that at a certain point, somebody pulled you aside and said, hey, this stuff that you're doing, you could do it full time. Did you sort of seek it out initially, or did it just sort of fall in your lap?
So I did it accidentally. I didn't realize that it was called analytics or data. So I'll give you a more concrete example. When I was in my first job, I was at a company called Live Mocha. So this is a language learning company based in the Seattle area. Very similar actually to Duolingo eventually took that space. Live Mocha, we eventually sold to Rosetta Stone. So they're kind of early on before Duolingo was there, they had 10 million plus members where you could go speak languages. It was like a language community. And so there was a small team of us working on the website. And my job was customer support. So this wasn't even customer success where I'm working with like enterprise clients. I'm just answering the emails that come in from millions of people.
Goodness.
So what would happen is we would edit the website in some way. Like we change the homepage or we'd adjust how courses work. Something would change.
Right.
And we would get 2,000 emails in the next day from people with opinions on it in all sorts of languages, like all over the place.
Oh, that's hilarious.
And so I noticed that no one asked me for this, but I said, this is important info that I want the product team, they should hear from the customers about this change, whether it's important or not. They need to hear some feedback. So I would categorize those. We were using Zendesk was the tool. And I would, learn how to tag them and put them into groups. And I would send an email about a week later saying, here's what customers said. I think this is important. This might not be, but I surfaced it to them. And so that was my first foray. And that's just basic counting categories of what people were saying and providing it. I was doing that without really anyone asking. And then people said, hey, you can do reports like that. What about Salesforce over here? So I started getting pulled into stuff before really knowing what it was. Because if you can make one report, people want other reports. So that's a more concrete example.
Yes. This is great. It's interesting though, because some of our guests, actually, a couple of our guests from Nigeria, they just coincidentally, they had read a Harvard Business Review article from years ago that said data professions, data analytics is the sexiest job in the 21st century. And so they intentionally sought to build the skills that would allow them to jump into this new stream of work. You've made the argument though that there's a certain level of difficulty into getting those early entry jobs in data analytics. You've actually described it as the great filter, which is something I recognize from my very nerdy YouTube video watching of the Fermi paradox. All right, so let's rabbit hole here. Could you break down what the Fermi paradox is first? And then could you talk about how the great filter maybe actually applies, not just in that context, but in the context of getting analytics jobs?
Yeah, for sure. So, absolutely. So the Fermi paradox, just in simple terms, is there are billions, just hundreds of billions probably of planets out there. And if the chance of life is small, if you have that many chances for life to form, at some point you should see other life out there somewhere. But we haven't observed it yet here. Like we should have at some point seen something that we haven't. So why haven't we seen even one of those hundreds of billions of planets end up with life that we can talk to? And so one of the theories is there's some kind of filter, something that happens when a society gets advanced enough that causes it to end or not be able to continue advancing technologically, is one of like the kind of fun thought experiments about that. So there's some kind of filter that we haven't hit yet, but that prevents there from being others, societies we could meet here in the universe. Right. So that's kind of the fun. When I was little, I'd read all these books about like these kind of like, the Dewey Decimal System, section 000 was where you get UFO books, Bigfoot, ghosts. Like I just, when I was little, I don't know. Like the librarian in third grade would call me like, Nate, there's a new Bigfoot book. Like I'm in. So I don't know.
Oh my gosh.
I nerded out on this kind of space stuff. So that was kind of fun when I was little. But the application to analytics is really hard to cross the spot from. There's a lot of people, tons of people interested in getting into data. Because it's really, you're working with interesting problems, with interesting companies. You can get into it without a formal certification, frankly, is a big deal. And so there's not a lot of barriers to entry. It's a pretty good job. It's an interesting job. So there's a lot of interest in it, but there's just not a lot of entry level positions, for lack of a better term. Like there's just not a lot of places to get. So you have just many more X people that want to get into the spot than is available. So that's the great filter, is getting that spot is really hard. The competition's really fierce for it. And so that's what a lot of folks want to hear. I go to school, I get a bachelor's degree, then I get the certification or focus in data, then I get a data job, like very similar to other jobs, right? Yeah. And that just doesn't seem to be the case for most. That happens to some, and you'll run into folks that way. But I think there's many more behind them who never got to cross that filter directly, that wanted to, that would want to today, right? So that's what I mean. What I mean by the great filter. It's hard to get that first. I experienced it firsthand as well. It's really difficult.
And I'd love to hear you talk us through your experience of that filter. I think the story is really fascinating. But before we get into that, I want to highlight the fact that you actually talked about potential solutions by maybe analyzing the problem a little bit more. You've suggested that a lot of applicants actually focus on the wrong things: technical skills, math skills, certifications. I mean, what else would you focus on if you're trying to get a data position?
Yeah, and this is what is so hard about giving this advice, because I think there's a lot of need for those skills. And it's why even in my first answer, I'm hedging and saying like, a lot of this is anecdotal, but I can speak from the other side of the interview table on this, right? Or the person who helps review resumes for folks. And because I'm pulled into other jobs that are data specific from other folks to help them filter through folks, or I've been in interview loops. So in short, technical skills feel eminently teachable. Like, let's say all things equal, I'll speak from the sales side, since this is the world I come from. If you get sales teams, if you can talk to a sales leader, if you understand how the sales process works for a tech company, for instance, that's really hard to teach. Like some folk, like that, it takes a while to kind of get that knowledge. I can teach you SQL in the next month, and you can be using the data you need to use, right? So that's what I mean by technical skills. They get you in the door. You have to have them on your resume. That's kind of how I'd put it. But that is not what ends up being the decision point when it comes to analytics jobs, when I'm on a loop. The decision point is, do they get marketing? Do they get product? So the technical skills, yes, are a differentiator among the people who get the domain, but it's not the only skill. And I think a lot of folks, it's easy to index on that because you can teach it. Technical skills, you can go to YouTube and find any number of courses on Python and SQL and all the latest tech, right?
Yeah.
Really, really hard to get someone who's like, oh, I've worked with VPs of sales to help them sort through the right questions to answer to generate more pipeline. Like, that's much more rare. And that's what analytics teams end up needing, at least on the sales side. So that's why indexing on tech skills is important, but it doesn't end up being the differentiator when it comes to these interview loops. It's kind of like a get you in the door spot is what I've noticed.
This is non-intuitive insight and advice that I don't think is particularly common, but it really resonates. In your specific journey of trying to break through that barrier, that great filter, Nate, you were working as a CSM. You discovered this pattern where you were starting to solve data problems already in your day job. You started getting interested in data acquisition, but sending out resumes didn't automatically get you that job. There was like a lot of coffee shop meetings involved. What were some of the steps that you took, the non-traditional steps that you took before landing that first data job?
That great question. There's a lot of things to do. For me, it was informational coffee interviews. That was the big one. I was working in Seattle, right? So this is great. But there's a lot of tech folks working for amazing companies here in the area.
Oh, true. Yeah.
So asking someone for coffee. So I also learned folks like talking about themselves, right? So you say, I'll buy you a coffee and I want to hear about your experience. Like, people love giving advice. So
boom. I love it.
Yeah, so they love that. So it's like, hey, let me go grab some coffees with you. So that started to develop some connections of folks who work in the tech area. Okay. It also showed me, what did they do to get to their spot? And that's where I noticed I was in another job and started just like, basically the advice was like a Nike slogan, like just start doing it. Like, you got to just start doing some data stuff where you are. Someone has a data problem, go make some spreadsheets and go like start solving problems where you are.
Wow.
So that was great advice, which is like, start showing you can do it, because that's a indicator to future folks you talk to that you might have some aptitude for it. It's less abstract. It's not I took a Python course. In my case, my CSM leaders needed to see all the renewals upcoming and how those were tracking. So I made a Google sheet, which we plugged a dashboard into so we could take a look at what was going on, that they couldn't see the breadth of the team. That's what I was able to build from this advice. So that's the non-traditional advice that I'm giving is stuff that I got, and it worked. They had problems. Almost everyone as a leader needs more data, frankly. And so if you can solve those problems, I found that it starts snowballing. Then someone else is like, Nate's helpful here. Let's ask him for more. And so you start getting more of that experience. So that's where a lot of that discussion came from. It was enough to push me to start being more intentional about what I was doing during my day.
This is remarkable. So you had a lot of these coffee shop informational interviews. You're offering to buy people coffee. I like that. You're starting to recognize some of the patterns and how they got their jobs while also taking the explicit advice they're giving to you. Just do it. Start solving data problems. And then one day a call came in asking if you could meet with, was it the CFO and the CEO or VP of sales in an hour?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So yeah, it was so part of finding a spot like this of networking, right, is letting folks know you're open to this. So I was trying to find a data job. So funny side story, I was applying to, like, Tableau was here local in Seattle, and this is kind of the heyday of Tableau. I would apply to places like that and get calls back. And the recruiter would say, hey, like, data, maybe you could do that, but like, you have a pretty good sales track record. Like, you talk well on the phone. What about sales? And I started getting like pulled towards sales jobs. And so I had that reaction on the phone. I was like, okay, never mind. So I was getting this gravity, which I got why they were doing it. But so this is part of that difficulty of getting over that spot. So yeah, I got a call from, funny enough, a friend who's a dear friend of mine now. And we played like Little League baseball back. So he said, hey, we might need a data person, but it's not a full-time gig. But I kind of knew I needed to take a step back, both in responsibility, and it was probably going to be a step back in pay to get the analytics experience I needed. I knew I needed like 2 years of like hands-on experience.
Wow.
So I went and said, okay, he said, meet them in an hour. You got to convince them to take a shot on you. And so part of that discussion was saying, we need some data. You aren't proven yet, which is true. So we will have you do data stuff half time, and the other half, here's this other role we need someone to do that you could probably do in 20 hours a week. So take the other half of your time, and we'll see how things look in 6 months, 12 months, kind of whatever it's needed to tell. I had to go in and say, I've been doing, that's where I could point to, here's the things I've built for these other places. I think I have an aptitude for it. I'm willing to take a risk on it if you are too, and try to say, like, listen, it's local to us here in Everett. It's the Funko Pops that you see kind of sitting up on the wall up here.
Yeah.
So it was at Funko here in Everett, and said, hey, I'd love to go just take a shot at this. And they said, great. And so that's how the genesis. My wife and I had just bought our first house. I had to take a pay cut and go, like, basically take a chance on myself. Say, I need to go spend a couple years learning. That's essentially what happened.
Nate, you just bought a house. What are you doing?
I know, it was a little lean for a couple of years. We're like, Christmas was like, hey, here's a like electric kettle to heat up tea. Like, it was just like, there was not a lot of, we kind of knew it was like the right thing to do career-wise, but there was some commitment to that, right? I had to like basically say, I think I'm good at this. That's part of the filters. I had to just say, I'm going to take a chance on this. And I can always go back to doing sales, or because like I had kind of that thought of, there's some security of a job that I can go do elsewhere. But I was so, I just really thought analytics was the right thing to hop into. So that's how I got through that filter. Was I had to sit down at that meeting and say, give me a shot. And they said, okay, let's give it a try.
Wow. One of the things that grabs me, this is almost like a scene out of a movie. This is like The Pursuit of Happiness or any number of these, sort of motivational movies that we've seen where the main character comes up from nothing. And there's that pivotal scene where he or she has to sell themselves. But here's what really resonates with me, Nate. You didn't get that opportunity on day one. You got that opportunity after multiple of these coffee informational interviews in which you started hearing over and over the right things to say, things people are looking for. You started building your proof points. So when the moment came, what do they say about luck? Success, it's luck plus preparation or something. I know I'm butchering that, but you essentially had a lot of at-bats, a lot of low-risk at-bats, so that when that opportunity came, you were able to really sell yourself in, I don't know, feels like a relatively high-pressure situation, and you pull through.
Yeah, it really did feel like it wasn't just, landed in my lap. I mean, it somewhat did, right? That's what part of talking with folks, and it was a friend who knew the opportunities. There's a bit of like, that's where the luck comes in, right? Just kind of, I happen to know the right couple of people, but also I would not have passed through that discussion if I hadn't done that preparation work, like you said, right? So I think that's when I mentioned, and I talked to a lot of early career folks at University of Washington and elsewhere, and a lot of it is when you start doing the work, you start meeting people, or you start having examples you can give when that come here in an hour opportunity shows up, right? So that's really what, like, you just have to be ready for it. And it's really, you can see the golf balls behind me. I play a lot of golf, and a lot of that is to be good at that sport just is practicing into a net or doing like, it's really difficult to get good at it. And to have a good score that day, it means you put in hours and hours to figure out how to do these different types of shots, right? I think it's very similar with the approach I took to getting into data.
Nate complains often on his blog about the brush on the right side of do you have like a driveway by your house where you normally play golf? It sounds like you keep landing golf balls in there.
I'm trying to think of that. I'm trying to remember that story. I have a garage where I hit golf balls now, so I think there's no brush in the garage.
Oh, okay. Well, there we go. But Nate is putting in the work. He's putting in the practice. Here's something that I find interesting, and we talked about this before we started to record. Nate, you mentioned the fact that you are often the most technical person in the room when you're talking to your internal stakeholders, sales teams, revenue teams. But you're often not the most technical person in the room when you're surrounded by data professionals. How did you decide what lane, data engineering, analytics engineering, data analyst, how did you decide which one was suited for you?
That's good. And I'm still in the process of figuring that out, but I think this position I'm going to at 1Password kind of cements the path, right? I've been actively figuring this out, but I think a lot of it was testing those different roles. I spent the last 7 years or so at Smartsheet. And some of that time was on the revenue analytics team. A chunk of that was building analytics engineering on the central data team and learning what it was like to build scaled systems with people who are much more technical than I am. And so for me, this is part of just trying different roles. Like, I transferred internally a couple times to learn what's it like to be on a revenue team? What about an operations team? What about a central data team? Like, kind of exploring options there. I also had a year at a startup where I was the only data person and built like the whole data stack doing that for a year. Man. So for me, it's been a lot of exploration the last, I'd call it 5 years. It's like data didn't feel like the end spot. It was like, okay, you can be a jack of all trades, which I have largely been. But at some point, I saw really successful data folks either go into the business, they became a product manager, or they became like some kind of operations became a really common thing. And so I tried out customer success operations as well. But eventually, it's funny, my dad, as I grew up, taught me, look for places where a little bit of your work goes a long way. Like places where it seems like you have a natural aptitude where you do 20% and you get to 80%. Like, look for those. And so I really took that to heart even when I was little to find opportunities. And so this is one where I noticed I did really well when I was on a revenue team, because I love sales. I like the energy of the room. Like, I go to their happy hours. Like, I love that team. And I noticed that they had problems to solve that data teams were neglecting, frankly, because they weren't as interesting, or the data team was working with the typically product or other parts of the organization. So I always found success on that team. And I eventually sat down and went, wait a minute, like that's where a little bit of my effort seems to go much farther than other places where I'm putting in a lot of effort and getting not as far, right? That kind of thing.
Come on.
So that's eventually I figured that out and said, okay, I need to look more into go-to-market and revenue analytics.
Sheesh. Okay, so your dad needs to have a podcast, first of all.
He has a great wisdom. He has like little nuggets you go like carry with you.
I mean, that is like succinct, but that's hard hitting. Go places where a little of your effort goes a long way. Go where it's almost, I heard someone else say it in a slightly different way. They said, go where you're celebrated, not where you're tolerated.
That's another, I love that. That's another great way to put it. And
I mean, it seems like such a great way to differentiate, isn't it? Because in that revenue space, I might be, let's say quantitatively, I might be let's say a more experienced, a more skilled data analyst than yourself. But when we get into that room of revenue operators. I can't hold a candle to you. Like, that is your playground.
Yeah, we all have that kind of specialty. I think this is key for data folks, is figure out learning marketing analytics feels like a career-long aspiration. Revenue, like there's eventually a lane, yeah, exactly, to hop into where I'm really good at that, but I certainly don't know much about the product side of things. If you put me in a room with marketing operations, I got to figure that out. Yes, exactly. I couldn't agree more. It's, you have a strength and leaning into that, and then you find others with their strength that you're able to work with. That's some other strength. That's really the key of with analytics. You're enabling folks with that data, and they can go run with it with their expertise, right? Like,
yeah. Oh, this is great. This is great. Okay, so Nate, you are in the super unique position. We've never spoken to anyone before who is in the process of transitioning from a long-term position. You have done amazing things at Smartsheet, and you're about to go start this brand new opportunity. Let's talk very briefly about the data setup at Smartsheet. So what did the data team look like? How is it set up? How did it work?
And it's evolved, right? I joined in 2017, right before they went public in 2018. And as of a few months ago, they're now private again. So I've seen the whole evolution of private to public to private at Smartsheet.
Wow.
So as you might guess, when I joined, it was 500 something employees, and now it's closer to 4,000, 3,500, right? So the company's grown. So the data team now is different than it was. But I joined, there's two kind of centers of data, is how I put it. One is on the revenue analytics side, which is where I got started. At the time, it was just myself and one other person. It's much bigger now. So there's because the go-to-market team, this is common at a lot of SaaS companies, is pretty large to sell. You have a pretty big sales team and customer success and support, all those kind of functions. They need analytic support and operational support. So there's the center of there, and then there's a central data team that for a long time was independent. We reported into none of the C-suite. It was really unique, where our leader reported to the CEO, but he was not a C-level, it was like a director level person, but they wanted us independent, right? Kind of like the independent, almost like judicial wing, like you're trusted because you're not under one of the C-suite people. You're able to give a perspective on without being married to a management chain. So it was that way for a very long time, for as long as I was on the team as well. Eventually went to a COO, but he again was very independent. And there wasn't really a driving part of the business that he was focused on in particular. Okay. So those are the two teams, and within each there's various bits. But the more I would describe the central data team as like the data platform team. Like they create the Snowflake of the world and make sure data is ingested in. That's where the data engineers all sit and all that world. Okay. Very common, like that central platform team. There's a team of data scientists and data analysts that team's now on the product team. And so a lot of the work there, which I think is pretty common in the data world, is focused on product, especially formal now that they're underneath the product wing. So those are the kind of the two. There's then scattered analysts around the company hired because folks need data for X or Y, and so they hire kind of one-off folks to go do it. So you also have kind of like this, it's similar to a hub and spoke. You have kind of that central platform and then folks who build off of that platform.
Interesting. And you mentioned Snowflake, Nate. I'm interested to know maybe what the tech stack sort of looked like and how it might have evolved, especially as Smartsheet went from a smaller company and a private company to becoming this behemoth and then going private again.
Yeah, so they got Snowflake it was in 2018 at some point, so pretty soon after I joined, Snowflake came in. Before that, it was I think it was MySQL, something that was breaking a lot. It was like an on-prem, like physical database. So that was they needed to transition to that to be able to enable the growth that they've gone through in the last 7 or 8 years. So thankfully, Snowflake has been around for basically as long as I've been there. And so having that technology has been advantageous. We've been able to build quite a bit off of it. And then I was the one who was able to bring in dbt. That's where I was able to say, hey, like we need some other tools in here as part of the central data team, and built out the analytics engineering practice. It's funny, for a while it was Snowflake, Tableau, and data transformation frankly happened. So Tableau has this good and also evil thing that it lets you put custom SQL code into the dashboard, and you can schedule the dashboard to run. So people use Tableau as the place to schedule a job to transform data. And so that works until it doesn't work anymore. And so there wasn't really, there were some enrichment areas that were updated every night through kind of more formal scripts, but it wasn't centralized in a way that a lot of folks were using outside of some folks in the central data team. So yeah, long story short, the tech stack was largely Snowflake, Tableau, and we said we need to scale. Like as Smartsheet continued to grow incredibly, especially during COVID, we had to develop some more tech. But that's kind of the basic pieces of it.
Fascinating. And does this mean then, since you brought DBT to Smartsheet, you'd been exposed to it at one of the previous companies? How did you first discover DBT?
So this was through the data Twitter community, funny enough. So so this is actually just through like learning about other people doing data jobs. So before COVID for me, I was the only data person or one of the few data people, right? Working kind of like in a little silo, working on my own problems, didn't know how others were solving the problem outside of maybe I'd see an article here and there by happenstance. Yes. So when COVID hit, I was invited to say, hey, there's people talking about data over here on Twitter. And so come over here and you can hear what people are doing. And it became this community of folks. And they mentioned DBT, which then I was introduced to the Slack through that. And went, wow, there's other people working on the same problem as me and have already solved the problem, or we can figure it out, like just this whole community of folks that I hadn't been introduced to before. So for me, it was a community-based thing. It was like finding other people like me solving interesting problems that I also needed to solve. And DBT was part of that solution, right? This sounds handy for using for us.
That's crazy. That's so interesting. I mean, it's been fun to watch how a lot of our professions have evolved with the internet over the past 10 years or so, where companies used to have a lot more domain, a lot more share of voice in terms of what professionals adopted and what we thought and knew about. But then as communities started to get connected, both through social networks as well as private communities like forums or Slack communities, we started exchanging information between each other. And we started to say, I'm using this, I had that experience, and so on and so forth. It's been really fun to see that evolve. Have you sort of carried relationships within the data community? I'm guessing maybe you're not as active on data Twitter now as you were back in 2018, 2017, but have you maintained any of the relationships?
Yeah, there's still folks some of us have migrated to Blue Sky, so I'll check in there and chat with folks there. So there's still, when you send, like if I'm working on something or send a message out, you'll still get replies, or there's other people that you recognize just from years of responding to their tweets or messages on Blue Sky. So that's been a really wonderful addition. I wish it was how it was. I think Twitter X is no longer what it used to be. And so I'm saddened by that. I think a lot of us miss what it was like in that 2020, 2021 was kind of the peak of it. Mm-hmm. So I certainly miss it, but that's how I was introduced to new ideas, and it's such a valuable place because this community. Now Slack is incredible for it too now, where everyone's talking. But that's what really accelerated my learning. Frankly, it was like there's other people who are incredibly articulate and intelligent and putting these amazing ideas out there. And so I think as I've talked to people wanting to become data career folks or thinking about it, I say, join these community, read what people are writing about, go join a couple discussions. That's one of my biggest pieces of advice. And it's funny, no one taught me what networking was, but that's networking. Like you're talking about nerdy ideas with people who find it nerdy too. And like eventually you say like, this is really cool. And then you find out about opportunities to do really cool stuff just because you're participating in a discussion that you all find interesting. So it's funny. For a while, I would argue before I found this community, networking to me sounded like a thing you do to like when you don't have, like when you're seeking out a new job and then it just feels slimy, like just like it just feels that way. And I learned actually it's just talking about nerdy things with people who find that cool. Like, and then you just get a community of people you can go to. Like that's really what it turned into. Anyway, that was my learning the last few years is it changed my mind on what networking really meant. It's just finding cool people and talking about stuff you find interesting with them.
I really would love for Webster to change the dictionary definition of networking to how you just categorized it, because that sounds a lot more fun. I love that. Having said that, Nate, this is all sounding great. This is sounding like Nate the guru, like Nate the mastermind. He has never misstepped. We've all had data disasters, Nate. One of the ones that I found intriguing, I think you teased this on your blog a little bit, was back at Funko, your first official data analyst job. The company experienced phenomenal growth while you were there, But you talked about almost getting fired. What was that about?
Always a fun story, right? When you're like, do something where this is the difficulty. I frankly think this is more of the filter for me than it was that initial discussion to get the job, right? This is where rubber met the road. Can you do this job or not? This was kind of the moment, frankly. So I learned, I'll summarize it this way. Counting stuff is hard. And that's kind of the way that I've carried myself since joining Data is if you can count stuff, you can have a long and interesting career. It's hard to count for various reasons because of the systems and people and politics and how to move data. It's really hard to count. So they had a particular problem where it was around what products to get. And there was a lot of lead time to get stuff from overseas, right? Where it was produced. So they had to kind of guess at what products to get. So there's all these ways to understand what was on order, what was coming, what we needed to change. And so a lot of this was around learning how to count stuff for a team that needed it, where there was real dollars at stake. If you miscounted stuff, they would misorder things, right? You had to count it. And it was all in processes where today you'd want to button up the processes, right? DBT wasn't around. Snowflake, like a lot of the stuff that you can use now to make your life easier on the data side didn't exist. So it was spreadsheet based, a lot of it. And I didn't appreciate how hard it was to count. And it's simple things like this. When you, like in Excel, if you type in an item number, which is on this report, and you put a space after it, in Excel, if you do math on that or say look up how many on sale do we have of 1, 2, 3, 4?
Yes.
And if you ask Excel to do that and there's a space after 1, 2, 3, 4, it will not count that because 1, 2, 3, 4 space is different than 1, 2, 3, 4.
Different.
And you won't see it. It looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, but Excel won't count it. So I had to learn. I didn't appreciate that. So things wouldn't count. I wouldn't sum things up right. And problems would happen every week. That was a different problem. And so that's what I mean is for a while, people kind of forgive you, but I was new in the job. And so I hadn't earned my stripes and earning trust is incredibly difficult in data.
Yes.
And so when there'd be different little things like that where I didn't know Excel did this, or I learned how to it basically taught me how to count stuff in certain ways I didn't double check enough, frankly, is what it was. I would say, I pulled this report, the formula's right, send. And I didn't have the practices that I have now to make just some basic, does this number make sense? Look at the number, say, does this number make sense? Is a question that you have to ask. So context. I had to develop those practices, and that led to the trust started to become lost, right? They're Nate's not giving me the right numbers, and every week a new thing is wrong.
Wow.
And really, it's funny. The message that was behind that was, it doesn't seem like Nate cares, and we need people who care.
Man.
Right? Because if you keep getting something wrong and it's not getting fixed, people say, you must not care enough, and I need someone who really cares. I think that was the message I received. And so my manager and I had to develop a plan to say, what are the checks we're going to do before you send this report? And every time there was all these new things that would come up that made it hard to pull. There were some systemic things that made it difficult. But we had to start saying, we called it the pre-flight checklist, and said, you have to check these 18 things. And when there's a 19th thing, the 19th thing is always on the checklist. And you just started doing that, right? So that was how to gain trust. They basically said, this needs to be right. And a lot of it was showing, I care and I want this to be right. And here are the steps I'm taking to make sure it is.
Yes.
And so that was really the instead of just reacting to bad numbers, it was, am I showing that I'm trying to give you the right stuff? So that was a big lesson, is counting is really hard, and you have to show folks that you care to gain their trust. That was a really, really important lesson. I'm thankful that instead of them saying, Nate, it's not working out, please leave, they could have been justified doing that, saying, this isn't working out. It's been, 6 months. Thanks for your time. But they said, well, please solve the problem. You have a short leash now, but we're going to give you an opportunity to go solve it. Because they still needed the problem solved. Data was still, there was no one else who's going to step in and do that at the time. So I think I got a bit fortunate. There wasn't a team that might've been a different story. So it was a, please figure it out. We really need you to. So that was really hard. I remember talking to people saying, that's when you ask, right? Is this the right career for me? That you start asking those kind of questions because you're this is hard. And there's no one, I had no community to ask. I was on my own, learning how to develop. I read a SQL book and a database book. And that's all I read. I was that's all I had. And so it was those stories. I'm sure there's others of folks earning their stripes And so now when I develop a report or I work with junior analysts, like a lot of my questions are, how did you gut check this? Like, did you look at the number? A lot of times people just check numbers. Like, did you look at it and ask, does this make sense? And if you don't know what questions to ask about why it does or doesn't make sense, you need to understand the business more to know that. But I learned that lesson loud and clear. And that's been a superpower after that once I got through that lesson.
Oh my man, you're giving me anxiety. Yeah, this story, I know how the story ends and I'm still anxious about it. Man, Nate, you talked once in talking about the concept of the great filter. You satirically talked about a job posting that would say entry level position, 5 years experience required. And it's funny, but the story that you're telling, some of that 5 years experience may not necessarily be more technical skills. It might be some of the context, some of the, like just business error checking and things of that nature.
That's exactly what, when I say domain expertise, that's kind of what I refer to. Like when you make a number and you have a sense for, is this really what our pipeline was last? Like, did our conversion rate really go down like that? Like those are that's the business sense you get after working in my case, in the sales and customer success world. You start to gain a sixth sense of like, that is a world-class number for retention versus that is so out of bounds. Like that, we got like something's wrong here, right? So that's the experience for and that's really hard to train. This is like to go back to our earlier part, right? It's really hard to train someone. I don't know if you watch Severance on Apple TV or not.
Of course, yes.
But they talk about, they work on computers and find scary numbers. Like those numbers look scary and they bin them.
Yes.
That's really like, you kind of develop the like scary number sense. Like that number is scary in a way I need to bring to a leader, or that's a scary number. Like it's not real. I need to work on that. So when I saw the scary number bit on Severance, it felt that way. Like you kind of have, and that's a hard sense to get from taking a Python course or university course. You kind of have to see numbers over and over and over again to start to get a sense of what is or isn't out of bounds.
That is so hilarious. For folks who haven't watched Severance, that's a deep cut right there. Go check it out on Apple TV. It's not necessarily a data show, but the concept that Nate is talking about, they're trying to train a new addition, someone who's joined the team, and they're trying to train her on looking at the screen of random numbers, and she has to pick out certain groups of numbers, and she's like, how do I know which ones to pick? And there's you'll know, they'll be scary. It's like a feeling. So that's that context, that business or domain knowledge that Nate is talking about. That's such a good illustration. But you've given us adequate anxiety with this story, Nate. We gotta bookend it with a happy story. So why don't we flip to maybe some stories, some data stories that you're particularly proud of?
So, I'm really, and this is a good moment to reflect on a long time working at Smartsheet.
Yes.
I have had the chance to build solutions and systems that are still used by hundreds of people. Yeah, like right now, hundreds of people are using the thing that I built a few years ago. So I'm really proud of kind of this sum of work that's been a culmination of learning how to provide value to sales teams in ways that data teams failed them in the past is really what I'm proud of. So there are dashboards we built that get thousands of views a month as people go and get information about their customers in Smartsheet. There's a solution that hilariously every year everyone I always hear people like, we need to get rid of this, and they can't. So Smartsheet's is a spreadsheet format thing on the cloud for work collaboration. So there's a lot more to it, but at its base it's a spreadsheet. And I bring in, for the sales team and others, we created a process of bringing in information about their accounts. Like I have, 15 accounts in my sales book or my customer success book. Here's all the data about them. Here's how healthy they are. Here's who I need to talk to next. Like that. Just basic counting stuff about customers.
Yes.
And that became incredibly sticky. And I'm very proud that people are using that every year. And then I'm proud of the work I did creating analytics engineering there. I think that was really crucial to build a data practice that could scale and build trusted data sources that the product team uses and the marketing team uses. And our customers even have some of the data there. And the sales team, of course, uses much of it too. So I'm really proud of that system and team that we built to provide analytics at scale. Those are kind of those are three major projects I'm just really proud of that work and that it's still used today. Are they perfect? No. Would I do differently now? Yes. That's a whole nother podcast discussion, or what I would do differently. But I am proud of it provided value at the moment it needed to be. And I'm not a perfectionist. I'm very much get something out now that will give value to the business. Wow. So anyway, I'm very proud of that work as I exit my time at Smartsheet.
My goodness. I love that we have the opportunity to catch you at this moment, Nate, where you can really be reflective and introspective about the work that you've done, the body of work. I love to ask about how data professionals measure their impact to the organization. I've seen you, for example, characterize one project that's saving more than 1,200 hours of manual data lookups every week on the sales floor. But what are some other ways in which you can look back at your work at Smartsheet and say, this is how I measure my impact?
This is always a hard question. Ironically, it's really hard to measure a data team's impact. I think that's like the rote answer is that it's really difficult to do that. I think you can get a sense of it in a couple ways. This is how I judge myself if I'm doing that well.
Okay.
So one of them is, do I get a phone call from the leaders I serve when they need something? Like, do they call me? Do they trust me as a strategic partner to help them with something? That, I think, differentiates a data team that's taking tickets and just is answering, add this filter to a dashboard, like those kinds of questions, versus ones who are brought into the room when there is a really tough problem to solve and they need someone who can not only provide the data, but can give some third-party thoughts and advice on what to do. So the number one for me is do my stakeholders bring me into their circle to discuss what to do in a particular situation? So that's, if I'm not invited into the room, that tells me I'm doing something wrong. I'm not trusted beyond just providing data, which is valuable. So that's what I judge myself as a strategic partner. And the other one is, am I making their lives easier with data in some way? Like, am I making it so, like in that example, that they don't have to spend time finding it, they're spending time taking action? And so that's really my focus. Is, am I able to provide it? That's why analytics engineering really is something that I center on, is that's helping get analytics to people without needing an intermediary in some way. Like I love making data sources in places folks can go and get what they need and be unblocked. I don't want them to be blocked by the data team. So it's really tough for data teams. A lot of it is, are you making your stakeholders happy? That's like, I think largely how folks are judged. It's very squishy. It's very ironic, right? A data team is hard to measure.
It is ironic.
But it's really tough to be able to measure that. And so that's how I look at it. Am I viewed as a strategic partner? And is my work contributing to making someone's job easier? That's kind of how I think. Those are the two parts of the road I think about right now.
I love that, Nate. And the first piece of what you just shared, tell me if I'm understanding this correctly. If your internal stakeholders are sending you tickets, it feels like they're at the point where they've already figured out the problem statement, or they think they have anyway, and they just want you to execute. On the other hand, if they're inviting you into the room where it happened, they haven't even figured out how to express the problem or put words to the problem, and they want you to be part of that process.
Yeah, exactly. I appreciate the Hamilton reference. Yeah, exactly. Like, I want to be in that room where they're figuring out the questions. That just, number one, it's interesting to be there. And that very much means you gain trust. Like I think trust is the currency of a data team. I really view it that way. Do people trust that you're going to get the right data? And do people trust that you understand their business? Like, that's really, I view trust as my main currency, and it's hard to measure it. I think you kind of know when you have it, and you know when you start to lose it. So that's really, if you have trust, you'll be invited into the room. They'll say, we need to bring Nate or someone, from the data team, whoever that might be, like, bring them into the room to help us with this question.
I'm picturing like a bat phone and Nate's next to Nate's computer. When that phone rings,
it's called a Slack DM. I think that's more or less what the bat phone is. It'll ding all three of my devices.
That's phenomenal. But to your second point, Nate, about the potential squishiness or difficulty of measuring the business impact. And again, it is ironic because data teams deal in data all day, but then when it comes to measuring impact, it can be squishy. It reminds me of indoor plumbing or electricity. Like, if the water is flowing, if the lights are on, nobody's really thinking about it. We turn on the faucet and it works. We're not thinking, thank you, water company, right? But the minute it stops working, Nate, the minute we get a brownout, like it's happened to me a couple of times recently, and I'm like, I feel like the most incompetent dad. Like, where's the candles? Like, we're all just gonna die. Like, I can't find anything. I can't save my kids.
Yeah, sure.
Where's Nate? Where's my bat signal phone? Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's very much, it can feel like that's keeping the lights on is a lot of it. And that's really where a lot of the, like, you're making sure that data is flowing where it needs to make decisions. And you'll hear immediately from someone who's in the dark suddenly, because like their thing is not up or it's wrong. Well, the worst is if the wrong thing gets published. That's even worse than not having any water.
Yeah,
that's getting like undrinkable water piped in.
That's right.
So like that's the last thing you want is that, to try to put systems into place to prevent that. But keeping the lights on is a chunk of it. And so I think that's a lot of the times when I look to gain trust is helping create that plumbing so that folks say, well, okay, you're dependable. You're giving me dependable drinking water. Now, what else can you do? Right. I think that's kind of where that I gain trust really that way is I consider that like table stakes. Like, can you give me that start, and then we'll develop the strategic stuff as time goes.
This is good stuff. Look, we could talk to Nate for another hour, but I don't want to be selfish with this time. We got to help him, let him get out of here. Nate, we mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, your family is adding a new puppy tomorrow. Have you all picked a name? Have the kids met the puppy yet?
So they haven't met the puppy. We're driving to pick up the puppy tomorrow. The name is TBD. We have a couple who are kicking around. My daughter, she's almost 7. She recommended the name Blanket because it'll be fuzzy and soft. So we said that can be a nickname. Like I love that as a nickname. Love that. You can call her that if you want to. But yeah, we're really excited. So if this is happening tomorrow, I would have had a puppy here to be like, yeah, look, give him the call. But we're really excited to get a new little addition to the family tomorrow.
That is so exciting. Yeah, that is so exciting. Nate, I want to ask 2 quick hitting questions and then you're out of here. One is just sort of overall advice you might give to someone who's looking to follow in your footsteps. The other is almost advice to Nate. Like 5 years from now, if you're looking back at Nate in this moment, what would you have wanted Nate to know? So first, let's give advice to folks who are looking to break through the filter or go from entry level to mid level. What do they need to be thinking about?
Yeah, so I think that the filter we covered a bit, so I'll give a bit of that, but I think the entry level up is interesting too. Yeah. For those joining it, go talk to people. Reach out to me, reach out to others, like join Twitter, join Blue Sky, find those communities of data people who are working. Join the GPT Slack. Locally Optimistic is another excellent one. So go be in the room with other data people and see what they're working on and go start meeting them. Start working on something about your own personal hobbies. You can put data on. I golf. I keep an incredible amount of golf stats to nerd out on my own, right? So
that is pretty
go
nerdy.
Practice analytics with your own hobbies and find that. So that's how to. Great. We went over, go talk to people and start doing where you are, if at all possible. So that's the breaking in advice is certainly there. For the entry level, I think this is one that is covered less because it's just less group of people asking this question, but it's really crucial, is learn how to understand the business of the people you work with. Like for me, it was, I go to all the team, go to every team meeting. If you're on a customer success team, go to the manager meeting, go to the director meeting. If they have a happy hour, go to the happy hour. If they have a virtual Christmas cookie decorating thing, go to the virtual Christmas, go to the things, understand what they're doing. It's so crucial to get their business and to feel like a part of the team and not the data person who gives me tickets for me, right? So entry level folks, answering tickets is the easy mode. That's the easy button. Yes. Go be part of the team and you'll start getting divided into more and more interesting questions. And the tickets will start decreasing as you start working on important projects for the business. So that's really that's the advice I wish I'd heard. I had to learn it the hard way. Frankly, I didn't have someone giving me the advice. But that's really the entry level that you either will get stuck taking tickets or you'll be able to advance and become more strategic. And a lot of that is just understand the business you're in and focus on what that is.
That's good. That's good. And in terms of career aspirations, you're moving on to a brand new challenge right now. 5 years from now, what advice do you wish? What are you aspiring to do? Are you looking to build your own data consultancy one day, become a golf professional, move to Bolivia finally and do microfinancing?
If only, that's some of can we do all those at once? No, it's, so golf professional in Bolivia sounds pretty fun. Anyway. So I'm going into, I got to manage a team at Smartsheet doing analytics engineering. And so I want to develop my leadership chops. That's really one of the big challenges is I think I've proven myself as an analyst. And I think I've proven myself as a leader for the analytics engineering team at Smartsheet. I really want to develop that leadership skill. So in fact, I would love that 5-year future version of me to say, here's the lessons I wish I knew on day one of that next thing. I really wish that I had that little telephone I could call. I'm confident I can go on, and I've had chances to lead before, but developing what it means to lead an analytics team in the business on RevOps, that's really, I'm looking to learn what that means and be like a strategic partner to that go-to-market team in a way that's different as a leader than it is as the analyst who's putting together everything for the team. So really I just think I'm going to learn a lot. And also I'm confident I'll be able to make that transition. So would love to have that phone call. I don't have it right now, so I'll have to learn it as I go, I suppose.
This was fun, Nate. This was fun. Folks, we've been talking to the international man of mystery, aspiring golf professional still. He went from customer support rep to the newly minted manager of RevOps Analytics at 1Password. It's been a great pleasure, Mr. Nate Sooter. Thank you.
It's been such a big thing. So again, it's an honor to be here. Really enjoyed the discussion.
This has been amazing. And we got to thank your dad as well. We're going to be putting his advice to good use. Folks, this has been the Data Career Transformation Show. Thanks for being here. We'll see you on the next one. Bye for now. This show is brought to you by DBT. DBT is the industry standard for data transformation. It allows your team to prepare data for analysis in a way that's centralized, modular, and entirely open, all inside your cloud data platform. The outcome? Consistently dependable analytics for your organization. Now, the DBT community was built for and by data pros. Come hang out and transform with 70,000 of the brightest analytics engineers, data analysts, and data scientists in the world. With DBT, you transform your data. With the DBT community, you transform your data career.